ahead and.
Doug did say he would be a couple minutes late.
Okay. So just call this workshop to order. In attendance, we have Carol, myself, Ed, and Bob. And the first item for discussion is the interconnectivity discussion. And we'll go ahead and, is Russ gonna take it?
Yep, Russ, if you want to just introduce yourself and go ahead and present the statement of estimated regulatory costs.
Okay, this is Russ Wire, and I'm getting an echo here. Anyway, I'm the real estate econometrics president and your assessment methodology consultant. And I prepared the statement of estimate regulatory costs, which is a requirement on rule either adoption or repealing. And let me. So,
You're actually connected twice, which might be why you're getting feedback.
oh. Didn't realize that I was.
I'm assuming the other RW that's on here.
Yeah, I'm the W, so hang on a minute. Let me.
You're on there as Russ and you're on here as RW. And I can't kick you out for some reason. There you go. Oh, nope, it's still there. Let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this. All right, I'm trying to remove your other one. Okay, is that better? Did that help with the echo? No, he's gone. All right, gotta hold up for Russ.
There, now can you hear me?
Yep.
There we go.
I removed your other one from the meeting.
Okay, perfect. Remove both of me. Anyway, I'm Russ Wire, real estate econometrics and assessment methodology consultant, and also I was tasked to prepare the statement of estimated regulatory costs, which is a requirement of when you're either adopting or repealing rules that the board undertakes. So in this case, they're looking to repeal Chapter 6 rule, and we are required by statute that if you look at number 1.2, the requirements for the statement of estimated regular costs are defined by section 120.541 parenthesis 2 of the Florida statutes. And this really goes right down through everything they ask in a statement of estimated regulatory costs. Now, remember, this is regulatory costs, has nothing really to do with the assessments as we do them. But in this case, it has to, what kind of impact would you have on, for instance, economic growth, private sector job creation, employment, private sector investment in excess of 1 million in aggregate within 5 years after implementation, or should say, or repealing the rule. And the repeal of the rule will not have an adverse effect on economic growth, all of those. For the most part, all of these, the repealing of the rule will not have an adverse effect on either state, local, regional government entities. And that's really what the CERC is as a part of that requirement. The first of all, second of all, if you go, will have an impact on business competitiveness, including ability of persons to do business in the state, et cetera, et cetera. Will not. It's likely to increase regulatory costs, including any transactional costs in excess of 1 million. It will not do that. And a good faith estimate of the number of individuals and entities likely to be required to comply with the rule, together with the general description. We're down on 1.2b. And repealing the rule could have an impact on the operations and maintenance assessments levied on the estimated 5,795 single-family homes and 1,880 multifamily homes. That's a combination of Pelican Reserve and Gateway. And 207 commercial operations. The average persons per household is 2.36. The estimated affected population is just under 15,000. That's assuming that we have an 81% occupancy according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So essentially, the CERC is they're asking, how many people are affected or could have an impact. The rule could have an impact on, and that's all the property owners within the district. Good faith estimate of the cost of the agency. In this case, I said the repeal of the rule will cost the agency being the district, an estimated, I put 50,000 in there, but that's staff time and consultant fees to administer. And that is because if you repeal the rule, we will have to go through and do a complete overhaul of the methodology to bring it into compliance with the new, what's the word, and the new benefit determination once the rule, if the rule is repealed. It does not require any state or local involvement. And again, that's just an estimate. I just put that in there. It could be less. I doubt if it'll be more than that. The next one is a good faith estimate of the transactional costs, licensing, equipment required to be installed, all that good stuff. That won't require any transactional costs. On to the next page, the impact on small businesses. Repeal the rule will not have any significant impact on small businesses, small counties, or small cities as defined in section 122 statutes. Any additional information that the age determines may be helpful. There is no additional information that was determined. There are no, in the statement, a revised statement, whichever applies, a description of regulatory alternatives submitted under section 120.541, parenthesis 1, parenthesis A, small a, the Florida statutes, and a statement adopting the alternative or a statement of reasons for rejecting the alternative in favor of the proposed rule. Again, we're repealing it, not creating a new rule. So no written proposals have been submitted. Under the reference to the rule, the costs also apply to expansion ordinance under sections, and we're information provided in the statement. There were really, but that's just a note. But the bottom line of the whole report is that based on the information provided here in the statement, supports the repealing of the chapter rule in that it will not have any impact on local, state, regional government. So that's the report. That's the circle.
All right, so I'll open up to questions. I'll start with you, Bob. Do you have any questions for Russ?
Well, this was very nice, but it doesn't come close to what I asked and what I was expecting to hear today. And what I was expecting here is this is what Community A pays today. If the rule's adopted, this is what they're going to pay tomorrow.
So do you want to direct that question to him?
Well, I thought it was to the board last week, and I thought that's what I was expecting to hear. And I'm not hearing anything about that.
Russ, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Geppert, with regard to that, I know what you're looking for, but that would require doing several iterations of the methodology and to determine what the impact of assessments will be. And that is, you will have to go through and take a look at the silos again and which silos of which budgets are going to be measured. And then we're going to have to turn around and look at trip generations and all of those things that we had previously discussed. And so off the top of my head, you can't just say, well, it's going to increase at X number of dollars, because there are a lot of factors that are involved. That's going to take a little bit of a study to do that.
Yeah, I fully understand that, but the reason for the genesis of the question was we're expected to vote on something today to have a public meeting a month from now. We don't know what the hell we're voting on. So until I know first of all, the haste, I don't understand. It's not needed. Nothing can happen until 2026 anyway. But before I would make a vote, I need to understand the impact on the residents, all of the residents. And there's pluses and minuses in this. But I don't know if I'm impacted by $10, $100, or $1,000.
Yes.
Hey, Russ, can you just give us an estimate in order to come back with a reasonable estimate? How much effort, what kind of time is that going to take you? Is that a 3-month? Is it 6 months? How many hours? Just ballpark.
Well, in order to do the full-blown report, it will take us approximately 6 months. And we were going to target February, March to have it completed by that point, depending on what happens in terms of, if you repeal it, here's what happens. And then there has to be a lot of discussion as to what is being covered, what isn't being covered, how it impacts, and how the benefits are determined among all of the landowners.
So you're saying first iteration of an estimate would take you about 6 months, putting us at about a January, February timeframe. Is that an accurate statement?
February, March.
Yeah, that would be the target. That's correct.
Go ahead.
Russ, let's make this a little bit simpler. We have a methodology right now. If we had been doing this and it was implemented for 2025, okay? We would have taken that $3 million, which is the subject at this point in time, based on the 2025 budget. That 3 million would now be distributed. If we go by the formulas that are in place right now by our assessment methodology, it would roughly be 1/3, 2/3. 1/3 to Pelican, 2/3 to Gateway. So 1/3 of $3 million would be $1 million. If we put that $1 million in the current Pelican Reserve assessment methodology, it would all go under the category of admin. When you do that, now, what is the basis? What is the cost of when you do that? What does it come out to be?
Mr. See, we have, hang on, when I did that and I took a look at that, you're putting it under administration, it would roughly be just north of $300. But remember that now we're taking what you have to be careful about is saying that, hey, that's exactly what's going to happen, because that $1 million, actually, part of it would be admin because of the parks and recs, if that's a part of it. However, we determined to divide that budget part. The other part is roadways, and the roadways are generated by trip generation, which could come up with a different number. So that's why I'm hesitant to say, well, it's going to be 300.
Well, I understand that. My point is that the current assessment methodology has things in there that are trip generation right now, and saying a word.
A trip generation for a home in Pelican.
Yeah. So
Is it a different formula rate than a trip generation for a home in Gateway?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
So-
correct.
So it's not apples to apples.
But my point is that this methodology we currently have and we're using for 2025, the math is there would be about, by my numbers, and I think you've validated it, is about $323. We all know that if you do a new assessment methodology that follows the one Gateway has, where we separate out admin, parks, rec, water management, and roads and right-of-way, then that each one of those are under a different category or methodology of how you calculate them. So that certainly is going to have an impact. But just with the way I calculated it, it's not going to change by much more than $10 or $20 either way.
Well, with all due respect to your method of calculating, it's very different than Russ's.
Well, I
Because
understand that, but
well,
right
then-
now,
then
right
I
now,
don't know
the
what we're
people,
talking about.
right
because it
now, the
does
people,
not-
right
it's
now, the
not
people have asked the
apples to
question.
apples and oranges to oranges. Everything's not going to be an administration.
Right.
Russ has said that very clearly.
I
The
understand
way,
that, but right
you
now we don't
understand
have
everything,
that,
but what
Bob.
you want to hear is the only what you want to talk about. So please let me talk. I don't need help. When we develop the ponds, when Russ works on the ponds within Pelican Reserve, it's a different calculation than the ponds over here. So when you change all that, and when part of that methodology comes over here, something's going to change. The
On
trip-
both ends.
On both ends. And that would absolutely work to Pelican's benefit. We'll get
Yes,
a
we have
lot
to see
less.
the pro and the cons.
We
on
have
both
to
ends.
see all of the numbers to make a decision. You can't just say, put it in administration and that's what it's going to be, because that's not accurate.
Hey, Ed,
And we're looking at, to get that number and to get that information, March.
Can't wait that long,
Why?
Doug,
because you
have-
can't get your 2026 deal
So
done.
whatever.
It doesn't
Doug,
make any
do you
difference.
have a question now? That's the Carol.
It's just really quick, so that if I'm using kind of your logic with the 300, that's basically a 0.5 version of back of napkin type calculation.
Correct.
What do you think the variance on that? Is that, 10% plus or minus?
That's what I would go at worst case.
Okay.
But the people were wanting, and in the last meeting, you and Carol both were wanting, what is a ballpark of the cost of the impact? The
Absolutely.
impact is $1 million to be distributed for 2025.
That's
would be-
not the cost we were looking for.
No,
We were
no,
looking
no,
for the nitty
Yeah,
gritty.
I understand. The $1 million is the cost that would be Pelican's share to be distributed.
Might be, might not be.
And
I guess.
If the rule is passed, that's what the number will be, if, in 2025. You're 1/3 and that.
But that's
I don't see
predicated
that-
on all going to admin, and it's not all going to
No,
admin.
no, Bob, no, you're not listening. The total number is 1 million. Part of that 1 million is Parks and Rec, part of that 1
Break it
million
down
is
differently.
roads. So what Russ has to do is take that 1 million, in the end, when the new methodology is done, split it into the various components like they do on the Gateway side. Part of it goes into our roads, part of it goes into, well, goes into everything except water management. Goes in every place there. It would do the same thing over there at
Like,
Pelican.
Carol has.
and excuse
I
me,
would-
this is, I'm sorry.
Russ, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know it's kind of hard because I'm not there. I'm raising my hand, but you can't see it anyway. Mr. Geppert, I did want to clarify the water management measurement at Pelican Preserve and at Gateway are the same. What is different is the budget allocations. And, budget allocations, you could have the same management or the same calculation, but your budget numbers are different. Therefore, and your number of pervious and impervious acres are different. But we measure it the same way. We use the pervious and impervious acres.
But
So I just wanted to clarify.
Pelican currently pays significantly more for the water management than Gateway does, correct?
Yes, because you choose to,
You choose to do it.
but it's not a requirement. But yes, you can
Okay.
always, if you want to add more to the bucket, and that's a decision that you had made with your committees, and you came to us and you said, this is what we want, because those are the standards that are above and beyond what we need. Yes, so
and
your
what I'm
answer,
hearing-
yes.
What am I hearing? That we're going to bring us in, but now you're going to degrade what we're doing. But you're saying we could continue to pay more.
Well, with all the respect, Bob, I mean, if you read the pond standards, it's one pond standards for both communities. So if
There
you
are
actually,
exceptions in that. There's 2 exceptions.
well, then if you want to pull it up and show it to me, because you mentioned
Well, I
that at
did.
the last
I
meeting,
gave it to.
and I gave it to Chelsea, and
And I did too.
and unless you point it out to me, I do not
Do you have that sheet I gave you?
Not with me, no.
Yeah, so the standards were created for one entity, you have it, okay. And all, so if you wanted to go above and beyond and you have your residents pay for it, we didn't object to that, we are totally okay with it. But knowing that
where's the
the
sheet I
communication
gave you?
that has to go back to your residents is that you're not required to do that, so, but you choose to do that and we respect that. But what all will be required at that point is to maintain it to the pond standards that were created by Gateway, which is incorporated Pelican, unless I 100% missed it, but I think it's in the first page, 3rd paragraph, it says it's all.
Okay, I printed it out and gave it
Okay.
to Chelsea. I did not bring a copy with me today, but it's in there. It's in
Yeah.
two locations.
Carol, now you can have the floor.
Okay. I would like to see this complete review of the methodology. And I've been reading this over and over again, and I'm starting to understand it. I can't say that I understand it completely. But for instance, one of the first things that, Russ, that you and your company did when you first put this forward is that you took the entirety of the money and you separated out what was enterprise fund and what was everything else. In your report here, you outlined that that was your very first step, and that at that time you used payroll information to determine that 59% of all operations of this district were the enterprise fund, and that 14% and that 41% were everything else. So 59% was enterprise, 41% was everything else. Given that things have changed even in the last 4 years, from 2020 to 2024, I would like to see that reviewed again, because based on the numerous conversations we have had here at this table about the amount of staff time that is being spent on various things, I suspect that 49 or 59% is no longer applicable. I don't know what it is, But if that is the beginning, and maybe staff can opine on that, I don't know if they want to or not. But if that was the very beginning of this entire study that happened in 2020, I think the whole thing needs to be looked at again. And I think whatever happens, happens from that study. I'm not saying we should slant it one way or the other. I just think we should take all current conditions into effect.
And that's something that Russ will be taking in March, okay?
Right.
Correct. And,
If-
excuse me, Carol,
I don't want to predict how long it's going to take him.
He gave us March.
But
I don't want
today,
April.
we're going to be passing the budget. So we can take those figures that we know from this year, go through, review all the aspects of the methodology. Because for instance, also in the methodology, transportation roads are considered on the Gateway side. They are not on the Pelican side. But Pelican has started to repair and redo a lot of its roads. So roads will be a component of both Pelican and Gateway now. I think there'll be a lot of crossing and maybe the numbers, I can't predict what the numbers will be. I wouldn't be that bold, but I think it deserves our study. And we can take this year's numbers, and then once Russ has completely reviewed the study and done everything and presented it to us, then we can say, Russ, what if A, B, and C, what if we did A, B, and C? What's the result? What if we did X, Y, and Z? What is the result? And we can use numbers that we have a firm hold on. In fact, during that period between 20 and 24, you also had the addition of C5 over on the Pelican side. What is the impact of that? So I think it deserves the time and the effort to do the study.
All right, Doug has a question and I have a comment.
Yeah, I just have a couple things. So in order for us, I think, to get to a decision, there's a couple things that I think are really important. One, the purpose, as it's defined, is repealing the interlock agreement. I think we need to clearly define what is the justification for that. I don't know, Ed, you've kind of been leading some of that effort, but what is the justification for us to even have the conversation around repealing? What's different today than it was in the past? And if that's clearly defined, I think we need to verify that justification, because we've got, let's say, board opinion, we've got council's opinion from Pelican Preserve, and then we have our district council. I think whatever that justification is, if we can all agree that is a viable justification, I have no problem with having this discussion, because we should be looking at, all areas as a board, whether it's 20. Holistically, right. And we have been doing that, I think, over the past 5 or 6 years. So let's understand what the justification is, but let's verify that. And I think the only way to truly verify it is we probably need to get outside a third party, someone that's unbiased, to review both.
The legal part?
The legal part. If that's the justification, if the justification is the language, isn't viable today, or maybe that it wasn't interpreted correctly, or whatever it is, whatever that justification is, I think we need to get that verified. So we can say with absolution, at least let's say majority, that the repeal for the interlock agreement, based on the justification, is supported through, through third-party counsel, or we all agree that yes, it's different today than it was, or there's a justification for it. The other is the impact, which I think is what we're hoping to get a little bit of today. And I understand, Russ, it's complicated, but I also agree with Ed that we can come up with a ballpark based on some backup napkin math. And I think 300, at least from what I've looked at, is pretty directional correct. There's going to be a variance. We just don't know what that is. And then, but what is the impact going to be to Pelican and to Gateway? What is their, what does their plan look like over, 2 or 3 years? Because it'll take, this wouldn't even go into effect if we voted today until 2026. So what is the plan for Pelican over the next however many years? How would that impact their assessment overall? So we need to understand the impact. And more important, and then the last thing is time. Is there any time drivers? I know, Ed, you mentioned that there is, and I think that's in order for us to get it into the budget for
26.
for 2026, where there's a little bit of time crunch. And-
Staff needs it by February or March in a position to start the budgeting process in 2026.
Okay,
And I have
so
a-
the impact, one last thing. So the time consideration is really driven on if in order for this to be considered for 2026, there is a time constraint. However, there's always, the following year or whatever, whether that's desirable or not. So time is, the time restriction, there is some flexibility there depending on what we think is the priority. So that's just kind of what I'm
Well-
thinking that we need in order to make a truly informed decision.
Well, keep in mind that you go back and read what the people who drafted this 20 years ago said. This can be changed at any time by any board in the future.
But I don't think that's
It
what,
can be changed.
but I don't think that's what, none of us are arguing that.
Nobody's arguing that.
Well, my point is that the repeal and the impact and all that, while it's information that impacts people, the issue is that we've got, if this thing stays as is, 40% of our community is going to be exempt. 40%.
Well, that's what we need to be very
That's
clear on what
why
the
we've got-
justification-
We
They've never
can't
been
continue
exempted.
doing that.
Yeah.
You don't count the 14% we paid, that's not part of it.
I'm not saying that, Bob. I'm saying that if this rule stays, 40% of this community has
Exempt.
been made exempt.
From
That's-
what?
That's
From
from paying
paying.
the operation and maintenance costs.
And from
40%.
using any of those assets.
Yeah, but I think we're missing the point. It's like just,
Yeah,
the-
There's no benefit there.
well, hold-
Anyway, okay, that's not, to your point, Doug. I only have one other comment that I just want to
Okay,
throw
then
out.
I have some
understand,
questions to
I
Russ.
understand, but this is a workshop, we're supposed to work.
Yeah.
The roadway consideration. Russ, correct me if my numbers are wrong, but I believe the roadway component of Gateway Commons is 1.34 miles. The roadway component of Stony Brook is 5.58 miles. And the roadway component of Pelican is 16 miles. I mean, order of magnitude is way up there. And that will factor in this. I mean, I just don't want to lose sight that this is going to be pluses and
Oh,
minuses.
Bob,
But
just-
it
let's-
will,
Yeah.
hold on.
Yeah,
But
it
that's
will.
why, I really believe that the last meeting, we really focused on the negative. Pelican Preserve is gonna pay more. That's the message that went out, and that's what.
Only
you
if it's passed. Yeah.
Bob, that's the message that went out, and that's what your residents heard, and that's the amount of emails that I got today. Because there is a lack of understanding. Because we have to wait until March, so can you imagine their understanding when we don't have it, right? So we're expecting your residents to understand something that you yourself said that we need more time to get more
Yeah.
information to respond. So I do think it's gonna be pluses and minuses, because when it comes to roadway, Pelican Preservers are gonna be paying less, because now it's gonna put it into us. So I am 100% about, I can't speak on behalf of Doug and Ed, but I'm really well aware that it's going to be pluses and minuses from every single line item, and some may not be affected at all, but that's for us to know in March. My question is to Russ. Russ, are you saying March we're gonna get final numbers, or are you gonna get a draft of the numbers? Because there's a big difference between final numbers here, your numbers, and your staff can start working on their budget, and hopefully we can get that by that year, or you're gonna give me a draft set of numbers?
No, the goal would be is to be complete by March. So, what it's going to take is everybody, pulling and rowing in the same direction, so that we'll all have a sit down and have a preliminary meeting. We talk about, here are all the criterias and here are the things that we need. And here are the decision points along the way that we're going to need to make. Once we get to that point, then getting to the math is not going to be difficult, but we got to make all of those decisions first. And there's a lot of them.
well, and so Russ, let me come back, because I asked you earlier when, like, your first iteration of that, when would that be? And I think we kind of jumped the gun, we said February, March, but if I'm hearing you correctly, first iteration could come as early as January.
Yeah,
And then
that's true.
And then ultimately final,
Fine
approval
tuned, right.
would be March. So,
Right.
and I think we would drive towards having Russ's assessment, truly understanding the impact, both positive and negative, to Pelican and Gateway. I'd say we put the stake in the ground for February to have any hopes of 2026. And I'm not that, I'm not that concerned about driving to 2026. I would much rather do this right, because we are talking about 20 years of something that's been in place, huge implications potentially, both on both sides, positive and negative. But I want to make sure that we have a solid justification on why we're looking at this, and what the justification would be for us to either keep it or repeal it. And so that's why I think we need more time to make sure that we're performing our due diligence appropriately. And I'm not saying that it's not a right thing or a wrong thing. I don't know all the information yet.
So if I could
I have
try-
a question for Ed. Ed, were you looking to getting results and starting this sooner than later because you wanted it to make sure it was added and included on the budget of 2026?
Yeah.
Is that the
Yes.
reason? Okay.
Yes.
Does this-
I'm representing also, in addition to Pelican Reserve, I'm representing 2/3, double Pelican Reserve people who are fed up with this rule
Okay.
of picking up the cost.
It's just a yes or no, and then I'm gonna go to staff.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you.
So
Laura, sorry, Chelsea. You gave me a Red Bull, so we're gonna have to.
I know.
When do you start your budget items and conversations with Russ?
Usually January, we start looking at the assessment.
So you're gonna be
for
2
all the
months behind.
parcels, and then by February, we're starting to get the tables together and preparing the worksheets that we can have conversations. I have a little wiggle room. We like to get it to you guys with our budget in place with the calculations, the preliminary calculations by the beginning of April. So I would need it by the end of March at the latest.
So
That's fine.
so do we have some
Where the timeframe
time?
that Russ is giving us, we'll let it work within the confines.
That,
of
so
what
that
we
was my
normally do.
question, because we
Yeah.
would still be able to accomplish the
And here's the
following
bigger
budget.
question. Sorry to interrupt, but here's the bigger question. Russ, are there any additional drivers or influence that we can have in order for you to either ensure that this is done by January or if not sooner? Like, is there additional costs for additional headcount, or it is what it is?
Doug, it is what it is, but the key is going to be, I mean, there's going to be things that we will need to know. For instance, what is going to be the cost of the roads next year for Pelican Reserve? I mean, those kind of items, what we will have to do is get those costs so that we can start putting them into the silos to do the measurement. So there are going to be pieces. That's what I'm saying. The first time we get together, which needs to be soon, is the fact that we need to create a timeline, and here are the items that we're going to need. Let's start gathering those points.
And I think we'd be comfortable as long as there's
And they,
well, not only an end date, but a variance that we're comfortable with. I mean,
P-PAC's already appropriated money for next year for roads.
yeah.
I don't
So
know it off
you
the
might
top of
know
my
too.
head,
Let's
but
say
somebody knows it, right?
10%.
an
Whatever. There's going to
idea.
be a variance because we
Yeah.
don't finalize until we finalize, and things could change.
But they know what's in the budget.
Right.
But remember, the goal here is, first of all, we want to put it in the particular silo, as I like to call it, the particular fund, if you will. And when we get to that point, whatever the fund is, the fund is. But I need to have like a nice round number, if you will. That's because what I'll be doing from that point is creating the measurement and how we calculate it, and then it all falls into the assessment ultimately. And ultimately what we do, just like our methodology is now, there are 7 budget inputs in our methodology for OM. And when you plug those in, the assessments fall out at the back end. And that's ultimately what we're doing here. But we need to create those, quote, 7 categories, if you will.
And what would you need to get started?
Well, first thing we need to do is we need to sit down and say, what is being covered? In terms like now we're going to put roads in for Pelican Reserve. That's one thing. We have the water management. So is
Assessment.
all of those little items, I need to sit down and say, if I need to sit down with staff and say, here are all the items that are going to be ultimately covered.
And
That's what we need.
because we can just look at the budget now and just see the items that are allocated for Pelican and see what this follow within us,
Another
which is
question
not
for-
that difficult. to
Another
do.
question for Russ.
I just have
Yes.
2. Oh, go
Okay,
ahead.
go ahead. Ed and then Doug.
And Chelsea.
Yep.
And Chelsea.
Russ, this debacle we're in has 2 components. The operation and maintenance component, which is discussed by Chapter 6. What about the capital? What rule are you following that allows exemption of capital?
I didn't know where there were exemptions of capital.
Oh, yeah. 20 years. What rule were we following,
What
people?
capital have we spent in the last 20 years?
All capital expenses that we've had on these same assets.
On the gateway.
on
Yeah, I'm
Gateway
saying, but
have been
what's an
exempted.
example?
Well, for a good example is $500,000 last year to FPL. $500,000. We picked it up. You guys didn't pick up any of it.
But we're doing it on ours. It's gonna be the same thing.
No, this
No,
is
that's
on the
not what he's
boulevard. This is not in your community. My community has these same costs and my people pay through it through their HOA fees. You guys pay through it through the deal because that stupid issue somebody made years ago of a public bond.
But would
That's the
that,
only
would that
reason we're in that
include,
mess.
so if we were to go back, Pelican would be included in that project?
No, right now, I'm asking the question. We have for 20 years been exempting capital. My question is, where's the policy?
Well, that's an exact question. He was looking the other way.
Yeah, the question that you're asking, you keep phrasing it as exempting. The standard is there needs to be a benefit for the properties. It's in 190, it's in subsection 2.
No,
It
that's not my
talks about-
question, Ms. Zach.
Sorry.
My question is, chapter six is very clear, immensely clear. It's for operation and maintenance costs only. Doesn't mention capital, nowhere. My question is, what is our policy that has allowed our management companies for 20 years to defer and exempt capital? Simple question. I don't think you find one. It's been done illegally. And I'm telling you, I'm tired of this stuff. Somebody has got to be held accountable for allowing these errors to happen. It's a joke that this rule ever was passed in the first. Oh yeah, there was a public meeting. Public didn't know about it, didn't show up. There was no public input, not one single comment when this was done 20 years ago. But that still doesn't have anything to do with capital. Why are we deferring capital right now?
Okay, so I want to focus on that question, and I will say this. Our job ends where another person starts, right? So as long as we publish the hearing and we follow what we're required to do, and if they didn't show up, they didn't show up. Do I agree? No, because we're dealing with this now, but it's something that I don't necessarily, it doesn't
Can't
weigh on
fix.
us. It can't
Can't
fix
fix.
it. So,
Well, I think what Ed is saying is the interlock agreement is focused on the O&M, but there's a capital component that we haven't really mentioned that we need to look into.
it's not focused. It's
Yeah.
only covers those two.
So I
items.
think it's in scope for us to also look at capital to ensure that there's justification and that we don't need to look at that as well.
The issue is it needs to be done immediately because we have no justification for deferring capital. None whatsoever.
Well,
Never have.
So-
And I think that's it's really not a question. I don't think it was fair to ask Russ that. Yeah, I think it's a Stephen Bloom question. I don't know if Stephen Bloom is here.
He's online.
Is he online?
Yes.
Steve, what's the basis of deferring capital what's the policy that you're going by to defer capital?
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So I know this is gonna be a little bit about terminology here, but the concept that we're deferring capital is not, I guess, the way I look at this. When every capital project is included in the capital plan, staff reviews it, that each project by itself to determine where the benefits are, and then places it within the budget and within a fund where those benefits are going to go. So if it's a project that is, I'll just call it a vehicle. We'll just say for a vehicle for a second. If there's a truck that is going to be used.
Stephen, let me cut you off. Let's just use Ed's example of the FPL because I'm really curious on that one.
Okay. So for it's the same for any project. If FP&L was going to be benefiting Pelican Preserve, Gateway, wherever, staff would put that into the budget, into the capital plan in those particular funds. So that decision was made each year by the people who were requesting the project as to, hey, this is a Pelican Preserve, this is, Gateway, this is Enterprise. I mean, obviously we do the same quite a bit with Enterprise. It has nothing to do with a rule. It is nothing, certainly not the rule that you're discussing was never brought up as a mechanism to not have any one particular group pay. So, in that particular project that you mentioned with FPL, we'd have to go back to staff and have those discussions, say, okay, what was the thinking with this particular project on where the benefits are and go from there. So it's really more project by project than it is a rule. Because the rule, technically the informal rule is whoever's benefiting from it gets the cost of the project. And then obviously from there forward, the O&M.
slide was with the Weir project. There were 2 weirs that were done in Gateway. There were 2 weirs that were done in Pelican. and it was one weir out at I-75. And Pelican paid for their weirs.
If I could chime in.
Yes.
So I'm going to take you back to 2023. We started to go down this bond series assessment. When we started, it was all one bond. As we started going down that path, we quickly realized as a group, board, consultants, staff, everybody, that Pelican needed to pay their fair share of the cost. And we ended up splitting and doing 2 different bond series assessments. Pelican with their proportionate share, the adjustable weirs. At that time, it was that example, that street light was not included in Pelican's.
Because there were no lights going up in Pelican.
Theoretically, yes, correct.
What it looks like to me is that if it was exempted under the O&M, it was exempted under the capital.
You just don't say that's not true.
I said, that's what it looks like it is, because that is what happened.
No, it isn't. Didn't you just hear what he said?
No, I heard what he said. I'm telling you what's going.
Your opinion,
I-
okay, your opinion.
Okay,
Okay,
where's the $500,000 for
That's
FPL?
what I was gonna ask.
Where's the $500,000 for
It-
FPL?
as of right now, it's not an
So-
opinion, it's a fact.
It's a fact. It's all in 001.
So if I can chime in.
And that's a combination of the information received by staff. I mean, at this point, we're not looking at the point fingers,
No,
but
that's
we
why
need
they
to,
did it at the
but we
time.
need to look at it like this is where it happened and how do we go from here?
Yeah, but that's
So-
going to be squared
so-
away.
But
my-
you're implying that it's wrong.
It is wrong. It's dead wrong. It's dead
That's your
wrong.
opinion.
No, it's a
it's only
fact.
your
It's a
opinion,
fact.
Ed.
It's
Why
a
is
fact,
that wrong?
because it wasn't, you guys didn't pay for it.
We don't use it.
But that is a capital, it's not a,
The weirs are capital, and we paid our share.
because we divided that, and what Chelsea was telling you.
It's what should have happened
Ch-
and everything
That
else.
we missed one.
Yeah.
We missed one, so how do we fix it? The weirs, we got it, we knew it, each paid for their own.
And nobody
The
nobody
FPL?
skirted from the price.
Yes, so
You
the
guys are
FPL,
implying that Pelican tried to avoid a cost.
no, because it didn't
No,
come
no,
from Pelican.
I'm not saying that.
So,
I
so
know
hear
that,
me
that's my
out,
whole
so
point.
hear me out. It did not come from Pelican. Pelican doesn't decide that. The information came from staff that went to Steven, and that's how the decision was made. So if you're taking that as us saying that Pelican did it, Pelican had no say. So it's staff, we missed something. When I say we, the 5 of us plus staff plus our consultants, we missed something. Now we know. How do we go and how do we fix it?
In the
So
future.
FPL is one item. Are they more? I don't know. That
In
is
the
just-
future,
In the future, yes. Unless it's something that we can do retroactive because the project is not complete. I did not know that. That is a legal question, and that's what we need to ask.
Let me give you another example. It's on the
And-
horizon.
And to that point, Flavia, the FPL lights in Pelican, we're still thinking about it.
And-
But
and
that-
then
over
now-
there.
And that would have now.
And that
Apples and oranges.
may come up in 26 or 27.
Everything that works here works there. And
So,
every project that you want to do that,
to
you bring
your
it up here.
point,
It's gonna be,
There's going to be plus and
Yes,
minuses on
absolutely.
both
and
sides.
we have to be aware of
And
that.
we need to go through and do a proper job and analyze everything except, and not put it on a napkin and say, okay, if we take this amount and divide it by that, okay, that's how much it's going to be.
So
By
Flavia,
March.
can I chime in?
Yes.
So for purposes of today and this, what Russ has presented, this board at our last meeting voted to take the first step in the repeal process, because that is a whole process in and of itself. So Russ is presenting to you this CERC. The next step would be to set a public hearing date, if you so chose, to move forward with the next step. What I'm hearing also and no matter what the decision is on this number 6, we have to update the assessment methodology. That has to happen. Carol mentioned it perfectly. The roads, the categories are there. Ed and I, we've talked in length about this. Gateways categories, I believe, are correct. We need to tweak them. Russ, I don't necessarily know that we need to know the specific budgets for next fiscal year so soon. I think once you set policies and
The line
decide,
item. Find out the line items and then the.
well, once your buckets are set, then it's just a matter of plugging in the numbers, because as a separate ask that I'm hearing is the specific implications of the repeal of 6. And that is the detail, I
Until we
believe.
have that information, how can we vote on it?
Well, that's what I would recommend is we don't vote on this item in the regular meeting. That a couple things happen. One, we all agree that we will be marching towards a January, assessment timeline, so we understand costs. 2, I think we need to be very clear on what is the justification for this, and I think we should engage a third party for an additional review, because we've got some input coming from our council, from Pelican, and a board's opinion. I think it would behoove us. We've done it in the past.
And then from our.
So we need to find outside counsel that can take an unbiased, independent review and come back with their recommendation. Then at that point, we'll understand the purpose, we'll understand justification, hopefully have it validated, we'll have impact, and then we also, in parallel, we are working towards a timeline of potentially getting this in for 2026, even though there's some wiggle room there.
If that's a motion, I'll second.
There's
mean,
no
well,
motion in this
But
meeting.
do we all agree?
No.
Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Didn't it
I
sound
wanna
good?
go- I want, no. What I want to have is I want to have the public hearing set September 19th. We have then time for the public input, both the Pelican Preserve people and the Gateway people. We might have to rent a basketball stadium to have it, but we will have the deal. Then's when you make the decision. That's
Make
when
the
you make the
decision when you
decision.
don't know the cost.
That's when you make the decision. But the cost is relative to the issue. The issue is repealing the rule such that there is no exemption. That's the decision.
I don't disagree with Ed on this point. Like
Yes.
whether, to me, if there's a clear justification that we need to repeal, then the repeal happens. The impact is secondary. We have to deal with
I
it,
agree with
right? So I don't disagree that we can still be marching forward, but I don't think there can be a vote until we understand that we have as a board, that there is a clear justification for us to repeal it. And then in addition, there's the, what is the impact? How will it affect assessment? Because whether Pelican has to pay more or less shouldn't impact our decision on whether it's justified or not to repeal.
And that's what I
Right.
was gonna go with, like.
Well, you should have an
I don't totally disagree with that. But what I'm saying is, just tell me what I'm voting on. That's all I want to understand. What is it I'm voting on?
Repealing the exemption.
Well, no, I don't think you don't even understand what that means.
Yeah, I do. I
Oh,
totally
you do?
understand.
Well, it should be, we're voting to repeal the
20 years worth of-
interlock agreement because of this.
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. That's what needs to be defined and it needs to be
Correct.
validated by
Because there's a
multiple
benefit
council.
to everybody.
That's your opinion.
Well, and if that's the justification that's on the table, then we need
Legal
to
counsel.
validate that.
Yeah.
We need to
Pelican
validate
people
that
can't get here
justification.
without riding 10 miles to get here. And you're acting like we're next door. We're not.
For one district.
Oh, we're going to use that card again. Okay.
I think we are.
Okay, so, sorry, the red bull is hitting me. The three items that we need, legal counsel,
Legal counsel,
outside,
um,
allow Russ to have the timeline, I heard you say January, well, I heard him say March. I
well,
guess maybe
January is
January
the first iteration, first iteration.
Okay.
Yeah.
But by final by March, and then the third one?
Well, the third one was just in order, we're putting a stake in the ground in January because there's a potential 2026 implication. The other thing is, I don't think it really matters if we set a
The
public hearing
hearing?
for September because we can always say, look, we're not there yet and we're not going to be ready for 2026, so we can always pull that back. But I think why Ed is driving for that is there's time considerations. Like you have to do things in,
And they are separate.
in
Like,
chronological
sequence.
order.
Yeah.
one is, I got the purpose and then the impact. I think, for the two of you guys are looking more for the impact. While
No, I'm looking at both because I don't agree with doing away with the interlocal. I really believe there was a adequate justification at the time.
At the
It took-
time.
It took them 15 months to do it. Now, I agree at the time, but for me, nothing has really changed in that time. We talk about Arborwood, but I'm going to introduce the motion a little bit later. We just changed the current Rule 6 to include Commerce Lakes, and then they're part of it. But I mean, the point is that the spirit of what was going on back then and the methodology that got them to where they adopted the interlocal, because there was a bunch of different points that were raised. I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they were looking at different things. The age of the community and whether they're going to be using facilities and stuff like that. And they ended up on interconnectivity.
And what I would ask is that we don't do anything. We don't add any additional motions to this until we can have clear
First of all, we can't-
justification and.
First of all, point of order, you can't do it. What Bob was wanting to do and proposing to do is an amendment, and we were told by council last time, there's a process you have to go through to do an
Which is
amendment.
more complicated
So
than what
you-
we have
it- it
now.
Well, you
makes
should have
it so
did it in
much
one meeting
complicated.
before,
No,
when it
you
was your
can't.
motion.
No, you can't,
Okay,
no.
so
no.
back to, so those are the items, and then I guess when we come to the 3 o'clock, meeting, those are the 3 items that we'll be voting on.
Well, for the
For-
capital expense, we need to research that
Clarification.
as well.
So, but to me, that's
It is.
I almost feel like that's separate.
I think
Because
it's part of
the
the
interlock
conversation.
doesn't have any
That's.
reference to it.
No ties to capital.
Which
That's
means.
Now, whether
correct.
that's
That's
being,
correct.
whether that's being
Which means that
interpreted,
you just included
I
it.
think it's a separate work stream.
Well,
It's capital, looking at the, how capital allocation,
the only,
that's
only, you're right. The only reason I brought the capital up is to point out just the fallacy of what's been going on here for 20 years. There's no rule. There's no rule whatsoever. You go read 190.021, paragraph 2. You go read that. I've read it so many times, it's not funny. And it makes it clear. You had to have a rule to do an assessment and break it apart. We don't have a
So for
rule.
the FPL that you did out here, how much was it?
$500,000.
$500,000.
But
okay.
my
Okay,
thing is
so-
next
no,
year.
Wait a minute.
Next year, hold on, man. Next year, we got,
Other-
road, irrigation,
Okay.
$2.5 million.
And maybe in
And
2
that
years,
2.5
we'll have
million
roads
is
for
Might
not
have
parking.
other
paid by
things.
us.
When Pelican changed their boardwalk, it was 1.1 million. Nobody came over here looking for money. That's a capital expense and Pelican paid it.
It's like an expense in Gateway Greens. I pay it. You
It's a-
guys
Oh,
are
no,
trying
no,
to
no, no, no,
confuse.
no, 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 no,
Pelican.
no. This conservation area is not in Pelican. The conservation area is in the district.
But the boardwalk is not something that's required by the permit.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes.
It absolutely
Well,
is.
let's not get in the
It
weeds
is?
there.
But I'm just saying, the point is, all I keep hearing is you think people over there are dodging the cost. I'm saying they step up to the cost. They don't come over here with their hand out and they budget themselves and pay for it.
I don't even think the argument is that Pelican has been dodging anything.
Well,
I
that's
think
what I
it's
should
that
hear
there's no
from
justification.
my friend here.
There's no justification
We need
for
to
it.
validate the justification that we've been following for X amount of time. There's no point of blame from one community to the next. We may be interpreting things correctly, we may be interpreting things incorrectly, but we need to look at it. And that's, Ed brought up a good point. When you're looking at capital, it looks like it's being followed through the interlock, what we do with O&M. I don't know if that's correct or not. I mean, it's 20 years ago and we've been doing it. I mean, normally what we say is this way we've always done it, but I'm not saying that it's right
And
or
Doug,
wrong.
I
Let's just take a look
completely
at it.
agree with you.
Let's
All I'm
just take a
trying to
look
do is dispel the notion that Pelican's not paying their
Yeah,
share.
I don't think that's.
They spent
So-
1.1 million on a conservation area that belongs to the district. Nobody came over here to write it. They just did it.
Okay.
So
So I
the
think we're
second,
good.
Anything else?
the second
Chelsea?
item, which these two items you will see again on your regular session here at 3 o'clock, is a draft, help me out, Zach, a draft,
hearing.
This is the
notice
for
of
the
public
proposed
hearing.
rule.
It's premature.
And that is for you as a board to decide if and when to set that public hearing date. It is required a minimum 30 days, correct, Zach? So we would need at least 30 days out from whatever date you select.
Just
So
Okay.
one
Can I
thing to
ask
the board
one-
really quick.
Okay.
So if we all agree, and I don't know if we even need a motion in the regular meeting to engage outside counsel for review.
We better.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So then we'll
I
talk
agree.
about what our budget is and how we go about identifying that third party. Okay,
Yep.
so I'll wait until the,
Okay. Anything else for the workshop?
No, that went
Zach,
well.
any?
I have a question about that piece, but I can bring it up in the meeting. Just on the timing, is it in line with Russ's analysis or is it in line with the rule repeal as far as the legal counsel timing? Because we don't have,
In between, I would
because
say.
we haven't identified counsel yet, and so, or maybe we have, I don't know, but we need to know what kind of timeframe
I
they can
think-
do this on.
the timeline for that, I would drive for when we set the public hearing, I think we need to have a decision prior to that. Because I
Why
don't
don't
think,
we get the
We-
decision
we could
before we set
easily-
the public
We could
hearing?
easily, Doug,
Well-
get at the regular meeting, get outside counsel to, by the time of the public hearing, have the answers
Yeah, that's
we
what-
want.
that
I mean,
would
it's
make-
30
that would make
days.
sense.
That's 30 days. That's easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay.
Yes. All right. All good?
All right, we'll take 3
All right.
minutes.
A 3-minute recess.
Let's take a 5.
5
Oh, you
minutes.
want-
5-minute recess.
You gonna